I want you to think about the most frustrating, draining, or just completely confusing person in your life right now.
Oh, I'm sure everyone has someone immediately popping into their head.
Right. Like, you probably have a highly specific person in mind already. Maybe you even had one of those imaginary arguments with them in the shower this morning.
Those shower arguments are the worst.
They really are. And you catch yourself thinking, like, if they would just change their behavior, right? If they would just stop doing that one specific thing that drives you completely crazy, your life would finally be peaceful.
Yeah, it feels like you're just staring at this giant, solid, immovable wall of a problem.
Exactly. And the entirety of that problem feels like it exists totally outside of you.
Well, I mean, it is a highly comforting narrative, honestly. When the problem is entirely external, it's contained. It's someone else's fault, which means, the burden of change rests completely on their shoulders, and we just get to sit around waiting for them to fix it.
Right, which never happens. So what if that wall isn't actually a wall? What if that external conflict you're dealing with isn't entirely external at all?
That is the million-dollar question.
It really is. So, welcome to today's deep dive. I'm your host, and our mission today is to explore a really profound text on the nature of consciousness, perception, and conflict.
And I'm thrilled to be here to unpack this with you because the source material we're looking at today presents a pretty radical paradigm shift.
Yeah, radical is definitely the word. It essentially argues that outer reality is not objectively fixed. Instead, the conflicts we face outside are just deeply, deeply intertwined with our internal landscape.
Exactly.
So for everyone listening, by the end of our time together today, you are going to have a completely new toolkit for handling toxic situations. And not by, forcing the world to change, but by reclaiming what the text calls your metaphysical responsibility.
Yeah, and that phrase, metaphysical responsibility, we should probably ground that immediately
Yeah.
because it can sound a bit abstract or woo-woo.
Yeah, a little bit out there.
Right. But the foundational idea here is not mystical at all. It's really about recognizing that what appears outside of you is never ultimately separate from you.
Okay, so how does that actually work in practice?
Well, every pattern, conflict, or distortion you encounter is participating in a larger psychological and energetic circuit. And that circuit relies on your own energy, your unconscious material, and, the specific meanings you assign to the situation.
I see.
So outer reality is actively shaped, animated, and sometimes completely distorted by the unhealed beliefs that you bring into it.
Is this like blaming the movie screen for a scary movie when the projector is actually inside us?
Oh, that's a perfect analogy, yes.
Yeah.
You're watching the screen, terrified, but the film reel is running in your own head.
Okay, let's translate that into like observable psychology. Are we talking about something like confirmation bias, where my brain is actively scanning the environment for the one person or the one comment that will just validate my deepest insecurity?
Confirmation bias is a very real psychological mechanism that definitely operates within this larger framework.
Right.
Your brain has these established neural pathways based on your past experiences. So let's say you have an unhealed wound around being undervalued. Your interpretive center becomes hypersensitive to being dismissed.
So you're constantly on the lookout for it.
Exactly. You will subconsciously seek out dynamics that feel familiar to that wound, and you will amplify behaviors in others that confirm it. The text argues that we don't just passively observe the world. Our internal structure acts as a selective magnet for very specific external experiences.
Okay, but hold on. I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who has been the victim of like actual malice.
Sure.
Because if someone actively harms me or steals from me, the cruelty isn't just a mirror of my inner psyche, right? It's a literal crime.
Absolutely.
So where is the line between, they are reflecting my unhealed wound and they are just a bad actor taking advantage of me?
That is arguably the most critical distinction we can make today. The text does not advocate for excusing toxic or criminal behavior.
Okay, good.
Yeah, harmful behavior is objective. Appearances are not imaginary. When someone steals from you, the theft is 100% real.
Right, they took your wallet.
Exactly. The paradigm shift is understanding the difference between the objective event and the psychological entanglement that follows it. What you meet outside is never only outside.
So the theft is theirs, but what happens next involves me.
Precisely. The theft is theirs. But how the event hooks into your sense of safety, your self-worth, or your core belief that the world is inherently out to get you, that is the circuit. The text focuses heavily on this specific energy we call corruption, which always requires two parties to create a sustainable loop.
Okay, let's define corruption based on the source material because it uses the term in a very specific way. It's not just referring to someone taking bribes or having bad habits.
No, not at all.
The text defines corruption as a pattern of consciousness built from denial, fragmentation, and hurt.
Yes. And when a person operates from that fragmented state, they are in profound denial of their own pain because they literally cannot look at their own falsity or their own vulnerability. They have to project it outward.
Which is incredibly confusing for anyone on the receiving end.
Oh, it creates immense confusion. It
Mm.
functions almost like a localized Wi-Fi jammer.
Uh-huh. A Wi-Fi jammer.
Right. If you walk into a room with someone operating from this kind of corrupted energy, their internal fragmentation just scrambles your signal. They emit these mixed signals and emotional hooks to preserve their own defenses without ever having to be honest.
That explains the lived experience of these toxic relationships so perfectly. It's why some people don't feel openly hostile, but rather deeply, deeply disorienting.
Yes, disorienting is the exact word.
You deal with someone where you constantly feel off balance. Like you can't figure out if they're attacking you or playing the victim or asking for help. You walk away from a 10-minute conversation wondering if you're losing your grip on reality.
Because a fragmented pattern cannot produce clear contact. It can only produce a field of partial truths.
Wow.
The confusion you feel isn't an accident. It is the core feature of their defense mechanism. Because if they keep you confused, you are too busy trying to decipher their motives to ever hold them accountable for their behavior.
That is so wild. So if the external world is this minefield of scrambled signals and emotional hooks, how are we actually supposed to react to them? Because whatever standard tools we normally use to deal with conflict seem to fail spectacularly when we encounter this specific kind of distortion.
They absolutely fail. We typically fall into one of two extremes, both of which honestly just strengthen the dysfunctional circuit.
Okay, what's the first extreme?
The first is feeding the corruption. You engage with it,
Yeah.
you obsess over it, you react with fear, you're constantly trying to explain your side of the story to someone who literally can't hear it. Or you offer what the text identifies as false compassion.
Oh, false compassion. That's huge. That means trying to fix someone who fundamentally does not want to look at their own denial, right?
Exactly. You just become an energetic host for their dysfunction. You're feeding the loop.
Okay, and the second extreme.
It's the polar opposite. You
Yeah.
pretend it isn't there. You engage in denial yourself.
To sweep it under the rug.
Right, hoping it will magically resolve on its own. But ignoring a distortion doesn't heal it. Denial just provides the distortion with the privacy it needs to continue operating in the shadows of your life, completely unexamined.
So denying it is basically like letting mold grow in the dark, and feeding it is like throwing water on a grease fire. Neither approach actually addresses the root cause.
That is an excellent way to put it.
Which brings up, I think, the massive realization from the source text. We have to change our primary operating question.
Yes, the pivot.
Right, the pivot. Instead of constantly asking, like, how do I fix that thing out there? We need to pivot and ask, what in me recognizes this? What in me resonates with this, fears this, or is being programmed by this?
And that pivot is essential because attempting to force a fix on the outside almost always hardens the pattern.
Yeah.
Outer confrontation has severe limits.
It's like arguing with the tip of an iceberg, right?
Yes. If you only address the surface behavior, you are missing the underlying mechanism driving the dynamic. The real architecture of the problem is structural.
Meaning it's built into us.
Right. If you don't dismantle the inner structure that makes you susceptible to that specific type of corruption, the exact same dynamic will just reappear in your life. It's just going to wear a new disguise in a new relationship or a new workplace.
Ugh, that is so true. We've all seen someone leave a toxic job only to end up with the exact same boss in a different industry.
Exactly.
So to understand what that inner architecture is actually made of, the text introduces the concept of thought forms. And the outer distortions we face are almost always seeking out these internal structures to hook into. We should probably define this clearly because a thought form isn't just, a passing casual thought like, I should buy milk.
No, definitely not. A thought form is a repeated pattern of consciousness that has been charged with feeling, attention, memory, and momentum over a very long period of time.
So it has some real weight to it.
Immense weight. If a thought is repeated enough and energized with enough emotion, it begins to function as a semi-autonomous psychological program within you.
Wow.
And these programs manifest as recurring self-criticism, chronic fear, deep-seated resentment, or even, superiority and obsession.
If we think about this in terms of mechanisms, it's remarkably similar to an autoimmune
Oh,
response.
I love that comparison.
Right, like in an autoimmune disorder, the body's defense system mistakes a harmless cell for a deadly virus and begins attacking healthy tissue. A thought form does the exact same thing to the mind. Your brain mistakes a slightly ambiguous email from your boss for a catastrophic threat to your livelihood, and suddenly your nervous system just floods with panic.
It's an identical mechanism, yeah.
And the most dangerous part, at least from what I read in the text, is that these thought forms use the language of your own mind. They speak in your exact voice.
That is the chilling part.
Right. They say, I am going to be abandoned, or I am fundamentally unlovable. They don't announce themselves as foreign programming, so you naturally assume they represent your core truth.
The unconscious identification with the thought form is exactly where the trap snaps shut. Because everyone possesses thought forms. They are just a byproduct of human experience and conditioning. The real danger lies in assuming every thought your brain generates is an accurate reflection of reality.
Which we all do all the time.
Right. When you merge with a painful thought form, it literally hijacks the interpretive center of your mind.
And by hijacking the interpretive center, it basically acts as a filter that dictates what every single event in your life means.
Precisely. Once a thought form takes control of the interpretive center, it biases your entire perception of reality just to ensure its own survival.
So it's actively defending itself.
Yes, it will make completely neutral events appear threatening. It will cast suspicion on people who genuinely love you. It creates this whole internal climate of despair where temporary pain feels like a permanent condition.
That is so heavy.
It is. The issue extends far beyond mere positive or negative thinking. This internal climate dictates your reactions, your choices, and the specific types of people you even allow into your orbit.
Okay, so bringing this back to the beginning. When that incredibly frustrating person we discussed earlier does the specific thing that drives you crazy, they aren't actually creating a new wound. They are just plucking the string of a thought form that was already installed in your mind years ago.
Yes, the outside hook finds the inside loop.
The corrupted signal from the outside finds the unhealed wound on the inside. That's incredible.
That is the complete circuit. And once you recognize that circuit, you can dramatically change how you interact with the entire world. The text outlines a really radical shift in how we view these encounters.
So what's the first step in that shift?
Well, we have to stop treating the external symptom as the entirety of the problem. When you encounter someone who is cruel, draining, or manipulative, your immediate action is to withdraw direct fuel from the outer form. You just stop feeding their distortion.
Okay, cut off the fuel supply.
Exactly. But the crucial second step is using that painful encounter as a diagnostic revelation.
A diagnostic revelation, meaning you use the awful experience as basically an X-ray of your own psyche.
Yeah.
You ask yourself, what specific internal nerve did this person just strike? And the text lists out some uncomfortably accurate access points. You literally have to interrogate yourself, like, did this encounter activate a dormant fear of rejection? Did it trigger an addiction to fixing broken people?
Right. Or was it an unconscious guilt, a suppressed rage, maybe a deep need to be chosen to validate your own worth, or even a confusion between chaotic intensity and genuine love?
Oof, that last one hits hard.
It does. But you must locate the actual access point that the outer distortion utilized to plug into your system.
I want to pause here and just challenge this again, because the concept of treating someone else's bad behavior as a personal diagnostic tool can very easily sound like victim blaming to a lot of people.
I hear that, and it's a very fair point.
Like if a coworker actively throws me under the bus on a major project, and I respond by focusing completely on my own inner wounds, asking myself why I attracted this betrayal, doesn't that make me entirely passive?
Yeah.
Aren't I just letting them get away with professional sabotage?
That is a completely valid concern, but the text is highly specific on this point.
Mm-hmm.
Using the encounter as a diagnostic tool does not mean you abandon action in the external world.
Okay.
Setting boundaries, creating professional distance, reporting the sabotage to HR, outright refusal to participate in the dysfunction. Those remain absolute necessities. You do not reward harmful behavior.
Right, you don't just sit there and take it.
No, you do not allow the sabotage to anchor into your life or ruin your career. The fundamental difference lies in where you locate the center of your healing.
Relocating the center of healing, that's a great phrase. Because when you set a boundary normally, you are often still intensely attached to the outcome. You block the person, but then you spend the next 3 weeks fuming, waiting for them to realize they were wrong, or expecting the outside world to eventually deliver justice or closure.
And that is the trap. The corrupted outside world, which is inherently defended and fragmented, is structurally incapable of giving you closure or truth while remaining what it is.
Wow. Structurally incapable.
Yes. If you look to the person who sabotaged you for an apology or for restoration, you remain bound to their dysfunction. You are literally handing them the keys to your recovery.
That makes so much sense.
Instead, you stop using the outer distortion as your healer. You utilize the event as an anchor for the inner work. You set the firm boundary externally, and then you turn inward to heal the specific access point, like perhaps a belief that you must tolerate abuse to be successful, that the coworker triggered.
That distinction changes everything. You handle the external logistics, but you reclaim the emotional resolution for yourself.
Exactly.
So once the boundary is set, how do we actually execute that final step? How do we clear out the internal debris so that the thought form loses its power over us entirely? The text talks about starving the pattern. We touched on that regarding the external person, but how do you starve an internal thought form?
You have to stop feeding the internal loop. Healing demands a strict refusal to energize the old circuit. You have to aggressively interrupt the rumination and the fixation.
Which requires looking at the biological mechanism of rumination, I think, because when you engage in those fantasy arguments in the shower, where you finally deliver the perfect monologue that destroys the other person's argument,
Who's linked there?
right, your brain does not know the difference between imagination and reality. It literally pumps cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream as if the person is standing right in front of you in the bathroom.
Yes, your nervous system is fully activated.
So to starve the thought form, you have to physically interrupt that physiological circuit. You might need to change your environment, focus on a grounding exercise, or actively divert your attention just to let your nervous system baseline drop. You literally cannot think your way out of a physiological stress response.
That somatic interruption is absolutely required before you can address the cognitive layer. You can acknowledge that a distortion occurred and that you were wronged without becoming food for the fear.
Without spiraling.
Right. You cultivate clear seeing without fusing with the emotional payload. Because thought forms do not persist solely because of energetic momentum. They actually survive because of interpretation.
What do you mean by interpretation?
Well, the human mind acts as a meaning-making machine. It is constantly drafting hidden conclusions, or what the text calls false laws.
Ah, right. The false laws. What does a false law actually look like in practice? Let's trace it back to the coworker scenario.
Sure. A false law is an unconscious generalization your mind makes to protect yourself from future pain. So after the betrayal by the coworker, your mind might quietly draft a law stating, this means no one in my industry can be trusted.
Oh, I see.
Or if we look at relational trauma, a law might be, this means my needs are inherently burdensome to others, or this means love always devolves into manipulation.
So it takes one painful event and turns it into a universal rule.
Exactly. Every time you experience a profound hurt, your mind quietly passes a new piece of internal legislation. But those conclusions become deeply embedded seeds. And because they filter your perception, they subtly tune your inner field to recreate or expect similar outer experiences.
So we end up confusing our trauma responses with objective reality. Just because an abusive dynamic feels familiar and predictable doesn't mean it is safe or true. But we accept the false law as the absolute truth of the universe.
We do. And real healing requires uncovering that legislation. It demands asking not only what hurt you endured, but what specific law you unconsciously drafted in the aftermath.
So uncovering the law is the mechanism of liberation.
It is. Once you identify the false law, you can drag it into the light, challenge its validity, and intentionally rewrite it with something truer and more expansive.
And when you engage in that rewriting process, you arrive at what the text describes as true integration, right? You systematically discharge the emotional battery that powers the thought forms. You bring the fragmented, denied parts of your own psyche out of the shadows.
Yes. You stop granting unquestioned authority to every single recurring thought. And by removing the inner hooks and rewriting those false laws, the external corruption completely loses its access to your system.
It just can't plug in anymore.
Exactly. What once caused intense confusion externally begins to make complete sense because you can finally perceive the fragile, frightened architecture beneath their behavior. You are no longer demanding that the outside world become pure and coherent before you can experience peace.
You completely regain your agency. You stop trying to conquer the surface of reality, and instead you transform the causal inner conditions that allowed the outer distortions to take root in the first place.
Beautifully said. It requires a commitment to uncompromising honesty internally, combined with disciplined, firm discernment externally.
So, to bring all of this together for you listening, do not feed what is destructive outside of you, but never leave its corresponding roots unhealed within you. Life operates as an interactive network. If something cannot be resolved through outer means, like if all the arguing, fixing, and boundary setting aren't reaching the deeper issue, you must turn inward.
You have to.
Work at the structural level. Unwind the false law, remove the inner hook, and reestablish your own clarity.
The outer world will always present challenges, of course, but it no longer dictates your internal state.
Right. Well, before we wrap up, I want to introduce a quick tangent that builds on everything we've explored today. We've spent this entire time talking about the individual, how your personal unhealed wounds act as magnets for toxic interpersonal dynamics.
Right, the micro level.
Exactly. But what happens when we scale this up?
Oh, that's fascinating.
Right. If individuals are constantly projecting their unhealed thought forms onto the people around them, what happens to society's collective reality when millions of people are walking around projecting the exact same unhealed cultural thought forms?
Wow.
Are our historical conflicts, our political polarization, and our societal wars just massive macro versions of this exact same circuit?
I mean, it certainly seems plausible.
It's definitely something to consider the next time you look at the news. Thank you so much for joining me today to break this all down.
It was a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
And to everyone listening, until next time, keep diving deep.